Besar apa dampak pembangunan infrastruktur yang selama ini telah dibangun oleh pemerintah di berbagai daerah? Untuk mengulas lebih jauh sudah hadir secara eksklusif di studio CNBC Indonesia, Direktur ADB di Indonesia, Jiro Tominaga. How are you, Jiro?
Good, thank you very much for inviting me.
A pleasure to have you in CNBC Indonesia, Jiro. So we have reached the end of 2023, and considering the ongoing development of various infrastructure projects in Indonesia, and they are all big ones, can you give us an explanation and evaluation? So how is this year of 2023?
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I think the key message here is that Indonesian economy is resilient, driven by the domestic demand, strong domestic demand, and then also you mentioned about infrastructure, which is a very important part of this strong domestic demand. But the downside risks are coming from the softer global demand. So we project Indonesia to grow at 5.0% this year, and then also 5.0% next year. So if you look at
So the same number?
Same number, yes. And if you look at the third quarter economic growth of 4.9%, they're mainly driven by the domestic demand, and then also the fixed capital investment, which is infrastructure development is very important part of, is contributing to the growth rate to 1.8 percentage point, which is quite a significant number. So investment next year is also, we expect that to continue to be strong, largely also partly because of we expect the acceleration of the investment for the infrastructure, some of the projects that are under the National Strategic Program, and then also the development of the new capital in Nusantara is going to help. But also at the same time,
the government spending,
the government spending, yes, government spending is going to be to sort of achieve the target for the 2024 before the administration changes. Right?
So that was the highlights of it.
That is going to be the important
the
part.
Indonesian government must maintain concrete numbers and levels of government spending to achieve 5%.
Well, I think the infrastructure side, there's some target for the certain milestones to be achieved for the infrastructure project before the administration changes.
Okay.
That's also going to be quite an important agenda.
Okay, next year is a political year, but if we're trying to break down again from the components, right, of the growth of gross domestic product, which is consumption, investment, government spending, and net export. Consumption will be the champion for next year, as you said before. Yeah. But the softer demand causing from the net exports will be some of the major risks from next year's, if you want to see 5% growth, a solid 5% growth. How do you see this will have some challenging issues for Indonesia?
Well, yes, I think it is true that the export growth is the factor that is dragging down the economic growth. But in our assessment, the stronger domestic demand, including both consumption and investment, is going to more than compensate the expected prospects in the softer global demand.
What we really notice is that the ADB has increased the economic estimates for Indonesia for next year, but has decreased those for the rest of Southeast Asia during this year. What's the cause? What do you see? Is this the exceptional Indonesia, or just that happened in the peer countries that is just plain and something? What do you see?
Well, we did raise the growth projection from 4.8% in a projection that we had in April to 5.0% in September. This is basically driven by the strong domestic consumption that we saw in the first half of 2023. So we raised that, and then we kept that 5.0% in the latest December projection, largely sort of indicating that we're maintaining the same kind of underlying assumptions for that. Now, if you look at other countries in the region, the softer global demand is affecting more to this country, particularly more export-oriented economies. So that is going to be, that was the reason why we reduced expected growth rate for the Southeast Asia region overall to 4.3% in December to 4.6% in our September projection.
So you see that there's a really strong demand still in Indonesia's consumption in the first half especially, and then you elevate the number to 5%. But the Central Bank of Indonesia just months ago has raised the interest rate to 6%, you know, just adapting to what the Federal Reserve have done. So higher for longer is here to stay. How do you see this will impact the consumptions of Indonesian people?
Well, I think interest rate increase, of course, could have some implication. But however, we see a still strong sort of consumption going forward in this year, as I mentioned, but also next year. This is supported by lower interest rate, and then also the stable household fundamentals. And then also, some of the sort of the election-related spending from the government and parties will also going to help the consumption.
How about the uncertainties that came from a developed countries such as United States? We don't even know when the Federal Reserve will finally cool down its rate, its fund rate. In 2023, at the very first month of 2023, we expect that they will cool down on the latest months of this year. But until now, it's still maintained at a very high level. How do you generally see it?
Well, I think there are several kind of factors that we need to watch out for the 2024 economy for Indonesia. One is, of course, a lot of the downside risks associated with the higher for longer interest rate by the advanced economies, the elevated and then persistent core inflation rate in the US and then also the Euro area sort of hardened the commitment by the Federal Reserve Bank and also the European Central Bank to maintain the higher interest rate for a longer time. So this could have some implications to destabilize the financial sector. So this is something, how it's going to evolve, we will need to monitor that. But also there are some other sort of potential factors for downside. One is, of course, about the sustained or continued slowdown in the economy of the People's Republic of China. This particularly because...
So that kind of offset the things that happen in the United States.
So I think, this is also related to softer the global demand. So this is, China is the largest market for Indonesia's export goods. So that is going to be something that we need to monitor.